Welcome to the Imagenomic Creator Studio. I'm your host, Lisa Caslin, and we're kicking off our first series of podcasts with esteemed fashion photographer, Lindsay Adler. Thanks for coming on with me today, Lindsay.
Of course, my pleasure. What a lovely sounding introduction.
Well, there's more. So for folks that don't know you, I mean, I'm sure that there are not too many, but your credentials are really impressive. I mean, you've shot for Marie Claire and Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and many other widely read consumer publications. And on top of that, you really are a teacher. And I know I've seen you many times at Photo Plus and WPPI. And I think it's really great that you're sharing your wisdom with the next generation. And to that end, I understand that you're getting ready to release a new course in September. Why don't you tell us about that?
Totally. Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons I teach, but I think one of them, I mean, there's really twofold. The first reason is because when I teach, then I'm sharing all of my secrets, and then I need to go learn new secrets to share. So it pushes me. But the other thing is when I have to explain things and really break it down, I understand it at an entirely new level than I ever did before. So if you look at my work before I started teaching and after, you'll see a marked difference. Like, I got a lot better, and it's because I had to dissect my process and then really understand why I was doing something instead of just doing it by instinct. But then it makes it a little bit more dissectable. So that's one of the reasons I teach, the selfish side of it. But then, the other side is, I have been shooting for half of my life. Like, I started my business half of my life ago. Yeah. And I know not everybody has the ease of being able to devote half of their life to this. And maybe you discover it later in life, or you're trying to figure out how to make a living out of something and make a living out of this career. And you don't have well over a decade. I get it. So I try to create content to help people learn more quickly and get to the point of the important things. So the next class that I have is called Master Studio Lighting, and it's actually my first in a style of courses. So it'll be something that you do weekly. You watch videos, you have assignments. It takes you from the very beginning of studio lighting, if you know nothing, all the way through to really being able to use light as a language and to choose the right modifiers and position and all of that. So it's what I think, if I didn't have 18 years to figure this out and I want to compact it, that's kind of what I was aiming for people.
Yeah, I think that's great because, I think just, particularly if you're just starting out, it's like, what do I really need? Because it can be very expensive. It's an expensive career, right? So I think that's powerful and wonderful. And you're also still doing your workshop in New York City, right?
Yep. Those are kind of my two things that I regularly do. I usually am working on one educational project at a time. I pick one thing that I want to share. And then somewhere between 5 and 8 times a year, I do a workshop in my studio. And I have a couple different themes, but the reason that I do these two is one of the times I learned the most was not college, it was not workshops that I took, but it was when I saw a working professional photographer shoot. And when I saw them craft a scene, it was so different than looking at it in a book, like actually being able to see them work that. So when I do these workshops, I try to produce at the level of what I shoot. So I do hair, makeup, wardrobe, model, concept, and I try to make it an impactful image. But even though students obviously get to shoot, I know it's because it's how I learned, is watching one of these scenes and starting to piece things apart. So I do those several times a year, small group. And then I get to shoot what I would shoot for myself, but allow other people a chance to try it. Plus, it's really fun.
Fantastic. All right. So for us folks who would love to gain a little bit of knowledge before we sign up for any of your workshops, what are some of the nuggets of wisdom that you think would help maybe beginners or even folks that just want to up their game in terms of enhancing their portfolio or getting better at prospecting? Because I know that's a big hurdle for a lot of photographers.
Sure. Oh man, there's so many different pieces of advice I could give, and it's always the struggle. I get interviewed often with us, say, if you could give one piece of advice.
Yeah.
Oh God. I think one piece of advice that people don't grasp until later is that all of the technique that you can possibly learn is actually a starting point. When you understand lighting and posing, them by themselves, they aren't anything. It's the purpose of the photo. So I think to go from being an okay photographer to actually start creating beautiful imagery, you do have to learn, the technique, but it's when you have a story or a purpose that you create award-winning imagery. So even if you're not there yet, that's what you eventually should be leaning towards. There's no one right pose or lighting. It's how does this lighting tell the story? How does this pose flatter the subject?
And I guess through your teaching of the different lighting options and posing, once they get down that they need that story, then they have the repertoire of understanding to pull from to make that happen.
Right. And that's exactly it. That's kind of my theory of going from good to great. Is good is technique, great is idea.
I love it. That's good. Okay. So of course we want to talk about skin retouching. So what are some of your go-to best practices? What are some of the things that might help others in that realm?
Well, I mean, the first one is obvious, but it all starts with your capture. So you really need to be producing good quality images out of camera to be able to get the most out of it in post. And even something like when I retouch dramatic images, I don't necessarily let my shadows follow the solid black. I'll pump a little bit of light in there so there's detail to give me something to retouch and work with. So I think a lot of times you might struggle with retouching because the file you started with you're not going to be able to get amazing images out of it. So you can't forget the capture part of it, capture before post-processing. But for me, usually my retouching is a combination of things. I get my white balance, color correction exposure set first. Then I go through and I do blemish removal. Then after that, I will do frequency separation, local burning dodge, and portraiture as part of this process. And I actually, depending on the image, it won't usually be portraiture alone, as I'll use it in conjunction with a lot of other things. But it saves a bunch of time. I usually am doing, like I said, the color correction exposure, blemish removal, evening out tones of skin, and then at the end, it's things like contouring the face and liquefy. And so I have a process through how I handle images so that it just makes everything, it's literally workflow, so things flow better instead of bouncing around. But skin retouching is always a challenge because I change what I do depending on what the purpose is. Because I'm going to retouch a portrait of an older person differently than I'm going to retouch a photo of a high school senior, differently than I'm going to retouch a fashion model. So that is also another one of these things. Like in photography, you get as many tools available to you as possible so that you can apply it for each different purpose. And I think retouching is the exact same.
Perfect. All right. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with?
I think mine it's a little bit of more of an emotional note. Is that photographers, I think social media is an incredibly powerful tool. I find a lot of my clients today on social media, and I network on social media. And so I certainly think it shouldn't be overlooked and people should be considering it. But I also want to urge people to not gauge the value of a photo based on social media following and engagement. I think it's far too easy to put up a photo you love and then watch it not do so well and think that, well, maybe it's a bad photo, and that's just not how it works. So I think separating your perspective of what makes a good photo from its reactions and engagements on social media is an important part to getting better, because likes doesn't mean that it was a good or bad quality photograph. So just something to think about.
No, and I was actually going to bring that up because I know you were among the first set of photographers that, and I think it largely due to your age. You just came in at that right time, and you really embraced social media from the get-go, and it has worked out for you really well. How do you decide? What goes through your mind in terms of what you're going to put up? Because I can imagine, you are biased because you might think something is great, but other people might not. It might not resonate the way you thought. So what's your process for identifying?
It is always consistency and curation. Those two words over and over again. You need to post consistently, but it needs to be curated content. So you go, and I think that this is no different than what anyone would give you as suggestions for marketing. You have a niche, you have a specialty, you have a visual style.
Yes.
That's part of what helps you market yourself as a photographer. It's those exact same elements that make you successful on social media. People know what to expect. There's a curated look. People are much more likely to follow a feed that has a theme or a style to it than things that are all over the place.
Yeah.
So I post a minimum of 3 times a week, which means I'm constantly having to produce content, but that's good because I'm constantly having to push myself and try new things. And then when I do so, there's an overall look and feel. So like there's a way that I handle my black and whites, and there's a way that I have really poppy saturated colors. And it doesn't mean my feed is better than someone else's, but the people who want the look and feel I have, they follow me. And if they want soft and dreamy and ethereal, they follow someone else.
Right.
It's the same exact concept as with marketing and hiring photographers.
That's right. That's right. Great, great, great advice. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm going to let you go, but it was great, and we hope to have you back again.
Right. Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Bye.